we're here with Susan, and she's just going to quickly run through her testimony about what God has done for her in her life. So, hello, Susan, all the way from America.
Hi, Natasha. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you very much. So, if you'd just like to say really about what God's done in your life and what's been going on.
Hello everyone. My name is Suzanne Dunn, and I am a gemologist. I'm the founder of Suzanne Dunn Jewelry, and God has been amazing, Tasha. This company began, I would say, in 2002, and it began when I saw a coworker being going through a challenge with her supervisor, and I said that I could not have that happen in my own life. And I said, God, I need you to give me something, a business that I can do for myself so that I can manage my own time, so that when I do have children, at the time I didn't have children, when I do have children, I'd be able to have time with them and really be in control of my time and my life that you have given me. And after about 3 days of fasting, I went on a 3-day fast and prayer. He basically told me that I needed to start a jewelry company. But it's funny because at the time, I was a staunch Pentecostal, but like Caribbean, Jamaican Pentecostal, living in
Yeah.
Florida. Going to a Pentecostal church. I could not wear jewelry, no pants, we couldn't do our hair, nothing. And so when he said jewelry, I'm like, jewelry? But I'm gonna get kicked out for sure. And I remember praying and just saying, God, what should I do? And he said, I told you what to do. And so I started beading. I didn't know anything about jewelry. Like, what I mean, nothing. So much so that we had a store here in America. It was called Radio Shack. And it's so like little electronic gadgets and things. And I knew that I had to solder, because a friend of mine said you have to solder the wires together when you're making
Mm.
jewelry so the beads don't slip off. So I went to the Radio Shack not knowing that there was jewelry solder. And I said, I need some solder. And he said, what type of solder? And I said, silver. He said, what are you making? I said, jewelry. He said, so you're here at Radio Shack looking for solder? And I said, yes, I need. He's like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a jewelry designer. And he started to laugh. And he's like, okay, so he sold me the solder. And needless to say, it was a mess, right? Because it wasn't sticking to the metal. I couldn't understand. And I started crying. And I'm like, God, what is this?
Mm.
But I persevered, and I went on, and I ended up getting a scholarship to the Gemological Institute of America, GIA, where I studied gemology, and I got my degree in jewelry design so I could really become a jewelry designer, because I kept saying, God, I'm meeting all these jewelry designers, and I felt like a fraud before I started school. Because I'm like, they've been to school. I've never been to school. You've brought me to this thing, like you like the way you sent Moses back to Egypt and basically said, bring them out. And I'm like, Lord, what am I going to do? I don't have the skills. And so he provided me with a scholarship to the GIA. So I was able to go to the GIA, and I went on full scholarships. And in 2015, I moved to New York. And after a divorce,
Mm.
I realized that I wasn't able, because my husband was the breadwinner. I was a stay-at-home mom up until that point. And I realized that I had no way of sustaining my kids, and finding a job was so difficult. We ended up moving from a wonderful, beautiful duplex apartment to the basement of that apartment. And I remember praying and saying, God, what is this? And my friend said, Suzanne, come back to Florida. And I said, no, I can't, because God he brought me here to New York. He didn't tell me to go back to Florida. And they're like, so what's going to happen with the jewelry? I said, I'm going to continue doing that, but I need to find a job. And I went, and it was very difficult. I finally found a job, but we weren't able to stay in that basement. We ended up in another basement. This time, this basement was an illegal basement, so it wasn't fit to be rented, because there was only one exit. So one exit in, one exit out. So legally, the landlord shouldn't have rented it, but he rented it, and he actually charged me more than if it were like a real apartment. But I had no choice, because my credit wasn't great. Going through a divorce, my credit wasn't great. My job, I wasn't paying me that much, and so I had to take it. So we took it, and he also said the other catch was that we couldn't take any furniture in because it was illegal. So he didn't allow us to move in with any furniture. just some suitcases that could fit in the car, and my 3 kids. At the time, they were like 10, 8, and 5. 10, 8, and 5, yeah. We ended up sleeping on mattresses, like air beds, because the apartment came with 2 air beds, 2 stools, and a chest of drawers. And there was a time where the beds like started deflating because we'd been there for 3 years, and the beds would deflate in and out, like, on and off during the 3 years. And sometimes if I didn't have the money, we'd end up sleeping on the mattress on the floor, just on the deflated mattress on the floor. And in 2021, God sent, he sent a friend of mine to invest in the business. And I was able to make my first collection, Gears of Life. And when I launched that website, Tasha, I literally, like, tears came to my eyes because I said, God, here I am in a basement. Nobody knows my story. Nobody knows that Suzanne Dunn from Suzanne Dunn Jewelry basically lives in a dark basement and sleeps on the floor. But I did what I did, and I did what God has called us to do, and that's to keep pressing and to hold that bloodstained banner high and to do what he has called us to do. And I continued. No one knew. Then in 2022, January of 2022, the basement flooded and we had to leave. I went to a hotel, myself and the kids, for 3 nights. And the landlord said, unfortunately, you can't come back because the damage was extensive and there's no way that we'd be able to come back. And I said, okay. And the Holy Spirit said, so you know what you have to do? Because a friend of mine, a few months before, had told me about the shelter, the New York City homeless shelter. And I said, a homeless shelter? I cannot go into a homeless shelter with my 3 children. I mean, I went to school for interior architecture. I did my master's in architecture. This is not a homeless shelter? No way. I'm like, God, no way. But when that text came in that morning, the Holy Spirit said, you know what you have to do? And I said, okay, all right, I'll do it. And I got the kids ready for school, dropped them off. They went to school. In the evening, I picked them up and I said, so we're going to go to a place and it's going to help us to find an apartment. And my eldest, he knew because I told him, the name of the place. The other 2, I just said, we're looking for an apartment. I didn't say shelter. But while I was there, I remember just feeling so torn. Because I said, God, your word says that you will never put us in a situation that we cannot handle. You'll never give us more than we can bear.
Oh, yes.
I said, you said you would never let your children be ashamed. There's certain promises that I have stood on. And here I am, being treated like a substandard citizen. People being very condescending, speaking to me in very condescending ways. How did this happen to you? And I'm like, God. But I kept a smile on my face, because I knew that not only was I representing Christ, but I had to be strong for my kids because they didn't really know what was going on. And so we got through that night and they placed us in an apartment. But you know what? Let me tell you something. When you're a child of God, he will make the lions in the lion den lie down and become your pillow.
Wow, like that.
When we got to the family shelter, the person opened the door and tears came to my eyes because I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been in a shelter. I'd always seen movies of like one room with 100 people in it. I didn't know what to expect. But when we got here, it was an apartment building. And when we got in, we signed the papers, we did everything. They opened the door and it was an apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment with furniture, with a proper kitchen, with, internet and cable.
So it wasn't what you thought it was, because what you've seen on TV, you're not thinking it was
and not only
be.
that, but I realized, Natasha, in that moment that where I was the shelter. And this was a refuge. So although I had been fighting it for so long and saying, God, you cannot bring me this low. Like, I cannot do it. I can't do it. What I didn't realize is that was a refuge. The shelter was not to break me. The shelter was not to bring me to disgrace. It was actually a blessing in disguise. And that was Thursday morning. I didn't let the kids go to school because we were also exhausted. We got in at 3 o'clock in the morning. We were assigned to the apartment. And about 6 o'clock, then he was 6 now at the time. And he came in and he's running in, and he's like, Mom, it's snowing, it's snowing. And I'm like, okay, it's snowing. And he sat at the window and he said, Mom, but look, the snow is clean and I can see the clean snow. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, remember, when we were in the basement, we could only see the snow after everybody had trampled on it, because our eye level was with the street, was the ground, living in the basement. And we only had like 2 little windows in it. So we never had like a big window to see the snow coming from the sky. So for 3 years in that basement, my kids never saw snow coming from the sky unless we were outside. And the 6-year-old is now telling me, Mom, we can actually see the snow coming from the sky. And he's like, and it's clean. And nobody walked in it. And nobody trampled it. And he sat there and he was just like, God, you're so good. The 6-year-old at the window.
Wow.
And this was after me having a pity party, a whole pity party the night. And I jumped out of bed and I'm like, God, forgive me. Forgive me for not being grateful enough to see what you had done for us. You know, just worrying about pride, my pride, and suppose people find out and what they're going to say and what are they going to think about me, not realizing that God had blessed us in such a tremendous way. And that was just like the beginning of so many wonderful things in that shelter, a New York City homeless shelter. It was safe, it was clean, we played games in the shelter, we baked cookies in the shelter. I mean, it was an amazing. I actually finished my second collection, which is, I'm wearing this piece, the Mantra collection. I actually finished the second collection in that basement, in that New York City homeless shelter.
Wow.
And when we got out, we found a lovely apartment and we were able to move in. And I mean, and you know, since then it's just been up, and it's just been, since then I've been telling my story. Because sometimes people go through things and they're like, you know, nobody else knows my story. No one knows how I feel. But I am here to tell you that not only do I know how you feel, I may not know every situation, but I know how it feels to feel like God has somehow forgotten you. I know how it feels when you're looking around and you're, God, nothing is adding up. You're saying you're my provider, you're my Jehovah Jireh, but nothing is adding up.
Oh, yeah.
And I know how it feels when you realize that, you know what? You've been there all the time. But the answer that I was praying for wasn't the answer that... The answer came. He gave the answer, but it wasn't the answer that I expected. I didn't expect it to come looking like that. Because the home that I was able to move into after I left that shelter, I would never have been able to get that before. But because I was in the shelter, they helped me to get that apartment, and that first apartment that we got once we got out, and and the rest is history.
Praise God. And here you are today.
And here I am today.
It's true, like you're saying, he never does things in a way that you think he's going to do things. It's always in a different way, and you think, oh, it's that way, because I suppose your mindset on a different way, isn't it? With the Lord, of how he's going to do things.
Yes.
That's so encouraging for somebody that, you know, thinks that they're alone and God is not there for them, you know. And that's really encouraged me as well, you know, because we all go through things, don't we, in our lives. That's very powerful, very powerful. And so where are you now? So you still in New York?
I'm still in New York, loving it in New York.
Oh, okay. I'd love to go. I love to go to New York.
Yes, you should. You should come and visit us.
Yeah.
New York is wonderful. I mean, I've told people New York has honestly kicked my butt up and down the sidewalk, but I still love it. It's still home to me, and I've seen the power of God in every step.
Where do you fellowship then? What's your church big? Is it a small sort of...
It's a medium-sized church. It's World Healing International. That's one, but that's the one that I visit while I'm here. Meaning, I live here, so that's the one I visit. But my real church is in Maryland, and it's Kingdom Embassy Church. But I don't always get to drive there. But that is where my spiritual father goes, and so I spend a lot of time there. But when I'm not there, I'm at World Healing International.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, it was so lovely talking to you. And finally, we got here, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
I just hope somebody gets this and somebody really gets inspired by what you're saying and what God does in your lives. Just You know, give your life to the Lord, because he can transform your life from the inside out. Absolutely. Would there be anything you'd like to tell anybody that, you know, hasn't got a faith walk or feeling a bit discouraged or anything in their lives?
God truly is a God of love. And he is truly a faithful God. And what I tell people, because when I'm not designing jewelry, he also now has me doing transportation ministry. So I'm on the bus and I'm on the train telling people about God.
Wow.
And what I like to point out is that whether you believe in God, whether you think you're upset with him or you believe he exists or you don't believe, he still loves you. Because he loves us unconditionally. And there's nothing that we could do that could separate us from the love of God. So whatever you're feeling today, you know, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling left alone, remember that God will never leave you. He will never leave you. And he's just a prayer away. And if you are a believer and it seems like he has forgotten you, he has not. It's in those times that he's working really hard behind the scenes. And, you know, we hear that and it sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. Those are the times that he's working. He's really working. And also know that when you pray, the answer that you get may not always look the way you want it to look, but trust him. It's the best answer for you. And that's because he says that in his word, that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. Because had I still been in that basement, had the basement not flooded, I would still be there trying to figure out this New York system when it comes to housing, because it's very difficult to get housing in New York. It's very expensive. And there's a lot of red tape that you have to cross. And I would have still been fighting with that had God literally not flooded me out of the basement.
Wow.
But the flood got me out of the basement, got me the help that I needed. So I was able to stand on my own 2 feet today and be a testimony for him. So trust him. So that's my word. Trust him. Trust the process.
Amen. Trust the process. I will end on that. Trust the process and whatever, you know, God is doing in your life. And thank you so much, Suzanne, for coming on